What's up, people? It's been a while. Today, I'm bringing you a banger. We're doing a deep dive on physiognomy, which, if you haven't heard of it before, it's basically that you can judge somebody and their internal qualities based on their looks or external qualities. And we're going to hit the three big names in physiognomy, those being Aristotle, Lavater, and then the Italian guy Cesare Lombroso. So that should be good. And it's going to be a deep dive, so it might be a longer video. So strap in, sit down. All right, brace yourselves. And if your intuition maybe is a bit contrary to this idea of physiognomy, right, judging a book by its cover, I want you to take a look at this picture right here of Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. And I want you to look me straight in the eye and tell me that this is not an intentional design choice on behalf of the illustrators. I mean, look at him. Even if you've never seen The Simpsons and you just want to describe this guy, you might say he's like deceitful or mischievous or looks like he's going to steal something. He doesn't look like a very trustworthy guy. And indeed, if you watch The Simpsons, this is exactly true, right? So perhaps this notion of not judging a book by its cover, maybe that's a little bit unwarranted. Okay, maybe physiognomy has something has something that would be true. Okay, so we're gonna start with Physiognomonica. I'm butchering that, but that's Aristotle's book. Okay, so we're gonna do some digging into some primary sources today. So I want to start with some quotes that I extracted from it. This one wasn't too long. It took me a couple hours to read. But the opening sentence in here, of course, now I've lost it. Here we go. It says, mental character is not independent and unaffected of bodily processes, but is conditioned by the state of the body. And contrariwise, the body is sympathetically influenced by affections of the soul. So this idea of the body affecting the mind and the mind affecting the body is really foundational to the philosophical basis and validity of physiognomy, right? In order for you to properly judge somebody's internal qualities based on their exterior qualities, they have to have some sort of relationship, right? And this is exactly what Aristotle is beginning the book with, right at the beginning. So he goes on to highlight three different methods by which physiognomy has historically proceeded by. So the fact that Aristotle, or one of his students, is writing about physiognomy, and they say, well, historically it's been done three different ways. Physiognomy, we can infer, has like gone back to the beginning of humanity itself, right? People have always been judging other people based on the way they look, right? So it's kind of a very old practice. So Aristotle says that inferences may be performed on the basis of animals, and that's kind of what you saw here in this original picture at the beginning. This is not relating to the manuscript, the Aristotle's manuscript, but it shows the same principle, right? Where you can see this dude is looking like a dog, whereas this guy looks like an ox. I don't know, don't read Latin, so I don't know what they're talking about there, but that's the idea, right? Is you can infer animals have certain behavior, right? Deers are like skittish, whereas snakes are, mischievous, and animals have these different qualities, and if people look like the animal, then they have a certain quality, right? He also says that physiognomy has proceeded by inferences based on race. So in that regard, he would think that certain races have certain qualities, and if you look or have a feature from a certain race, then you might have that trait as well. So an example would be something like a Roman nose. You might not be Roman, but you still might have a Roman nose, right? And then the third method is physiognomy might proceed based on inferences based on emotion. So someone's face might seem to express emotions without them actually feeling that way. Like it's a more permanent way their face looks. Like someone just like permanently looks angry, or even though they're not, they might actually have like a angry temperament, right? But Aristotle doesn't really like this last method, so he doesn't really give it much screen time. So he then goes on to say, and I don't have it pulled up here, I forget what page it's on, but he says that I will give a list of the sources from which these physiognomic signs are drawn. They are these: movements, gestures of the body, color, characteristic facial expression, like sort of what your face looks like when you're resting, the growth of the hair, the smoothness of the skin, the voice, condition of the flesh, the parts of the body, and the build of the body as a whole. He also says that it will be found, moreover, in every selection of signs that some signs are better adapted than others, to indicate the mental character behind them. So not all signs of the face or body are like equally good at predicting your internal qualities, right? So he says the clearest indications are given by signs in certain particular suitable parts of the body. The most suitable part of all is the region of the eyes and the forehead, head and face, and next to it comes the regions of chest and shoulders. And then lastly, the things that aren't very good at predicting are like the legs and the feet and the belly, things like that. So basically the face is like the most useful. And he says, in a word, the clearest signs are derived from those parts in which the intelligence is most manifest. As if we're supposed to really know what that means. Basically just meaning the face is like the best part to determine somebody's character. And then he goes on another list, and he lists at length a bunch of bodily characteristics and their meanings. So I have a bunch of examples here. So a brilliant complexion indicates a hot, sanguine temper. And hey, one of my last videos was about the 4 types. And if you remember, sanguine is like the very extroverted one, right? So it says a brilliant complexion indicates a hot, sanguine temper, whilst a pale pink complexion signifies a naturally good parts when it occurs on smooth skin. And he says soft hair indicates cowardice, coarse hair courage. And he also says that a thick growth of hair about the belly significates loquacity, which is just that they're very talkative. He says when the flesh is hard and constitutionally firm, it indicates dullness of sense. But when the flesh is smooth, it indicates naturally good parts combined with instability of character, except when smooth flesh goes over with a strong frame and powerful extremities. And when, oftentimes in this book as well as Lavater, there's like lengthy descriptions of like parts of the face and other things, and you can tell the author has a very specific like person or like look in mind, but they don't really have any illustrations, so it's like difficult to know like exactly what this means. Like when flesh is smooth, it indicates naturally good parts. Like it's kind of hard to know, right? So you kind of have to use your imagination. But some of them are much easier to tell what they mean, right? Like this next one, lethargic movements are a sign of soft character, whereas rapid movements are a sign of fervid temper, which means like passionate, and that's like easy to tell what he means, right? We have some I can look up here. So on this page here, he has what the signs of courage are. So we already said coarse hair is, but he also says that an upright carriage of the body. And I mean, this is obvious, right? People with like slouched shoulders kind of look defeated. And then Jordan Peterson says to stand with your shoulders back, right? Well, thank you, Jordan. And we stand up straight, right? And that makes you like more confident. Courage is also denoted by size and strength of the bones, sides and extremities, a belly that's broad and flat, shoulder blades broad and well set apart, right? Excuse me. And he lists a bunch of other things here too, right? And then the signs of cowardice are a small growth of soft hair. The figure is stooping and lacking in quickness. The thickness of the calf is high up on the leg, as opposed to courage, it would be low down on the leg. A sallow complexion. And I looked this up. Sallow, I think, is like a green, yellow-green color. Anyways, you kind of have like a sickly color of your skin. Weak blinking eyes, weak extremities, little legs, and hands long and delicate. So yeah, if you want to be courageous, do your squats, because little leg people are cowards. Yeah, and they all apparently people with cowardice have a shifty, downcast look. He also says that impudence, which just means they're argumentative or rude, is signified by small, bright, and wide open eyes, with heavy bloodshot lids and high shoulder blades. Let's see, what else do I got here? A bunch more descriptions of some physiognomic characteristics. So signs of good moral character are a slow walk, a slow way of speaking, small eyes, with slow blinking movements. The compassionate are delicate, pale, and lustrous-eyed, and the top of their nostrils is furrowed with 3 lines, and they are always weeping. Such compassionate men are fond of women and beget female children, and in character they are mindful of the past, and they have a fervid temper. Compassion goes with wisdom, with cowardice, and with good moral character. Hardness of heart with stupidity and effrontery. How many more do I want to show here? Don't want to bore you guys. Uh, he has one quote that I have to mention here. It's on page 61 here. So Aristotle, one of the most influential men in the last 2,000 years or more of Western history, roasts gamers. In one of his books, he says, men addicted to gaming and dancing have short arms like weasels. So if you've ever played Apex Legends or NHL or League of Legends, Aristotle has something to say about that. He says you probably have short arms like a weasel. Anyways, so he has a bunch more descriptions in here that I just cut out just for brevity. But in general, I have some closing remarks here. He says that it is silly to rely on a single sign. You will have more reason for confidence in your conclusions when you find several signs all pointing one way, right? So he's kind of characterizing physiognomy not really as like a direct science with like one cause and one effect, like it's very obvious. It's kind of more of an art, right? You kind of have to use several signs in your judgment to make a decision. He also has a little section here on physiognomy and crime, and we're going to come back to this idea when we talk about Lombroso, because he was famous for this exact thing. And Aristotle says, an ill-proportioned body indicates a rogue, the argument being partly from congruity and partly from the female sex. So I guess he's like effeminate, right? He's talking about men here, of course. But if bad proportions mean villainy, a well-proportioned frame must be characteristic of upright men and brave. Only the standard of right proportions must be sought in the good training and good breeding of the body, and not in the male type. So, yeah, if you're like ill-proportioned, you're like more likely to be a criminal, according to Aristotle. And a lot of the things that he mentions in here, because it's like, I don't know how many pages this is, like 30, 40. A lot of them are just like common knowledge, right? He talks about how, as to the voice, when deep and full, it is a sign of courage. When high-pitched and languid, of cowardice, right? Like, this is common knowledge. Like, people with deep voices just sound stronger and like bolder. And whereas with like a shrill voice and who talks quickly is like not very confident, right? And also, if you've read other of Aristotle's stuff, I think on my video on sin, I talked about this, how one of Aristotle's things is this idea of the golden mean, and how a virtue is a balance between two vices, right? So like courage would be like a balance between rashness and cowardice, right? And so Aristotle has this very strong notion of balance and this idea of the golden mean. And he has this very same idea when it comes to physiognomy, right? The intermediate quality is best. So he says too much hair on the breast and belly means a lack of persistence. And whereas, sorry, let me get caught up here. Yeah, too much hair on the breast and belly means lack of persistence, but breasts devoid of hair indicate impudence. So kind of a balance again. And then another example would be, thus the greatest tenacity of purpose and the greatest acuity of sense will be found in persons of moderate stature. So again, not too tall, not too short. The intermediate condition is best. So that was kind of an interesting parallel between his ethics and the way he views physiognomy. So thanks for holding in there. We're moving on now from Aristotle to the next name, which is Lavater, or his full name, Johann Caspar Lavater. He lived 1741 to 1801, short and sweet. I guess that's not too bad, 60 years. But he wrote a book that was very famous for sort of reviving and consolidating a lot of dispersed knowledge on physiognomy. And the title of the book is Physiognomy, or the corresponding analogy between the conformation of the features and the ruling passions of the mind. Kind of a cool title. And there's some things that I wanted to point out here in the way he sees physiognomy, and then we'll go into some of the examples of features and how they affect our guess about their internal characteristics. So, and overall it's like quite similar to Aristotle. There are some differences, but the way he words some things is interesting, so I wanted to go over it. Okay, so yeah, and also this book has some like plaques or frames of different images of different examples, and now there wasn't any good descriptions of like why the plates were included, but I just thought they're kind of cool, and they're also sort of famous, I think, especially these ones here, where you can see we went over the 4 types in the last video. You see here is drawn out like a phlegmatic person, a sanguine person, a choleric person, and then a melancholic person who has a brutal hairline. I'm sorry. But yeah, kind of cool. This one has some pictures in it. So yeah, starting out on page 36, Lavater says this: "It is indisputable that all men, absolutely all men, estimate all things wherever by their physiognomy, their exterior temporary superficies. By viewing these on every occasion, they draw their conclusions concerning what their internal properties." And then again, on 39, "Every insect is acquainted with its friend and its foe. Each child loves and fears, although it knows not why. Physiognomy is the cause. Nor is there a man to be found on earth who is not daily influenced by physiognomy, not a man who cannot figure to himself a countenance, which shall to him appear exceedingly lovely, or exceedingly hateful. Not a man who does not more or less, for the first time he is in company with a stranger, observe, estimate, compare, and judge of him according to appearances, although he might never have heard the word or the thing called physiognomy. Not a man who does not judge of all things that pass through his hands, but by their physiognomy, that is, their internal worth by their external appearance." So basically what he's saying here in the beginning of his book is that people are doing physiognomy all the time anyways, even if they don't know what it's called, because we all judge things and people based on their appearances. It's an unavoidable part of human nature. So as opposed to just letting this be kind of a curious thing, Lavater is sort of arguing, like, why not study this? Like, why not systematize it rather than just denying that it exists? So then he goes on to do just that. And he has a good summary of the breakdown of the face here on page 61. So he's talking in this section about the triple life of man, which is the animal life, the intellectual life, and the moral life. So this is this section on that. He says, "The animal life, the lowest and most earthly, would discover itself from the rim of the belly to the organs of generation, which would become its central or focal point. The middle or moral life would be seated in the breast, and the heart would be its center point. The intellectual life, of which the 3 is the supreme, would reside in the head, and have the eye for its center. If we take the countenance to be representative and the epitome of these 3 divisions, then the forehead to the eyebrows will be the mirror or image of understanding, the nose and the cheeks are the image of the moral and sensitive life, and the mouth and chin the image of the animal life, while the eye will be the whole of its summary and center." So pretty interesting there, right? He is sort of drawing a parallel between the 3 parts of life in regards to like the animal life being like eating, sleeping, sort of basic biological function, being mirrored as the belly down basically, and also the nose or the mouth and the chin. Whereas you can tell somebody's moral life based on, you know, the way their chest looks, and as well as the middle of the face, right? And the supreme virtue or ability of man is the intellectual life, like thinking, performing a rational function. And this is obviously, since it's the supreme one, it's at the top, right? It's like the face as a whole, the head, and more specifically the eyebrows and above, and with the eye being the center, right? So he then goes on to talk about all of those sections. We're not going to go through all of them, but there was a couple sections that I thought were interesting, so we're going to talk about foreheads first. So foreheads, he has a lot to say about foreheads. Apparently they're super important. He has like a whole list of like 30 different things about the forehead. I'll just read a few of them here. So he says, the longer the forehead, the more comprehension and less activity. So more of like a thinking type rather than doing. He also says that the more compressed, short, and firm the forehead, the more compressed, firm, and less volatility in the man. So like sort of like a direct comparison, right? So a short, firm forehead means you're also probably like firm and less volatile. The more curved and cornerless the outline, the more tender and flexible the character. The more rectilinear, the more pertinacity and severity. And when he says rectilinear, it just means like straight lines, right? So I have a picture here that kind of shows this. This one in the center here has a curved forehead, whereas this one on the left has like a flat one, right? So that would be rectilinear, and this one would be curved in the middle. So yeah, we got a couple more down here. I might almost establish it as an axiom that right lines, considered as such, and curves considered as such, are related as power and weakness, obstinacy and flexibility, understanding and sensation. So if you can't decipher the Old English, it's not that old, but basically saying that things all over the body, if they're right lines, they're considered to be things of power, obstinacy, understanding, sort of like very domineering traits, whereas things that are curved are more about weakness, flexibility, and sensation. Again, interesting that he thinks that. And I mean, in some ways, he's not wrong. I mean, imagine like a strong, heroic person. Like, let's look up this guy. Crimson Chin. I've been doing too much web scraping, and now every time I Google search something, I have to fill in a CAPTCHA. Super annoying. Like this guy, I haven't really seen this too much of this show, but this guy's like the protagonist, like the hero, the good guy. And look at this, look at his chin. It's all straight lines. No curves at all on this baby. Whew. So basically this is what he's saying. He's talking about the Crimson Chin when he's saying this, right? He had this guy in mind. So yeah. 13. I have hitherto seen no man with sharp projecting eye bones who had not great propensity to an acute exercise of the understanding and to wise plans. So yeah, the projecting eye bones is just where your eyebrows sit right here. So yeah, if you have projecting eye bones that are strong, you have wise plans. Nice. Couple more things here. 97. Gray eyes generally denote deceit, instability, and indecision. Short sight denotes an able projector, crafty and intriguing in action. The squinting or false-sighted, who see on both sides, or over and under, certainly denotes a deceitful, crafty person, not easily deceived, mistrustful, and not always to be trusted, one who willingly avoids labor when he can, indulging in idleness, play, usury, and pilfering. Small and deep-sunken eyes are bold in opposition, not discouraged, intriguing, and active in wickedness, capable of suffering much. Large eyes denote a covetous, greedy man, and especially when they are prominent. Eyes in continual motion signify short or weak sight, fear, and care. The winking eye denotes an amorous disposition, foresight, and quickness in projecting. The downcast eye shows shame and modesty. Red eyes signify courage and strength. And bright eyes, slow of motion, bespeak the hero, great acts, audacious, cheerful, one feared by his enemies. So, a good description of the eyes there. And a couple more short ones here, and then we'll move on. Oh my gosh. 1 second. Someone at the door. Eyebrows. So, eyebrows regularly arched are characteristic of feminine youth. Rectilinear and horizontal are masculine. And then a combination of the two, arched and horizontal, denote masculine understanding and feminine kindness. Okay, pretty interesting there. Again, we sort of see this notion of curves being more of like a feminine thing, whereas rectilinear and horizontal straight lines are like masculine, strong. So he also has a couple things to say about the lips. Apparently, if you have firm lips, firm character, weak lips, weak character. And if you have full lips, you have an inclination towards pleasure and sensuality, whereas a lipless mouth is a lover of order and industry, right? When you describe somebody as being thin-lipped, that's sort of what it means, right? I'm just going to double check that that's true. If somebody is thin-lipped, tending not to speak frequently. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyways, whatever. Yeah, and then the chin, he notes that a receding chin is like equal to weakness, whereas a protruding chin equals to strong character, right? And I mean, I already showed you the crimson chin. Need I say anything more? But also, we have something like this, right? Which are you? And you got a progressive thinker, a typical reader of the morning leader, or you have a moderate thinker, a habitual reader of the yellow press. And I mean, the message of this little ad is obvious, right? Like, the person who reads the morning leader, look at him, he's like strong, got a protruding nose, full lips, a strong jaw, whereas the habitual reader of the yellow press has got a receding chin, with kind of a bad eyesight. He needs glasses, a long face, right? Another modern incarnation of this notion is the Virgin Chad meme, right? Look at this guy. He's got like he's looking at the floor. He's got kind of a receding chin, pale skin, again, glasses, whereas Chad has a nice tan going. He's got a strong jaw. You can see his chin is extremely protruding. Same with the nose, very strong nose. And his head is held high. He's not looking at the floor. So, kind of same idea, right? We've all seen that one before. Yes, so we're going to move on now from this to talk about Cesar Lombroso. And we're not going to stay on this guy too long, but he's sort of like the third big name in physiognomy. And he was famous for being a criminologist. A criminologicalist. And that's why he was famous. Basically, he popularized the notion of being a born criminal through biological determinism, which determinism, for those who don't know, just means that you had no choice. It kind of is like the opposite of free will. So people are born criminals, and we can identify them because they have certain physiognomic attributes or deformities, which seems kind of crazy, but he got real famous for this. And so if criminality was inherited, Lombroso proposed that a born criminal could be distinguished by a large jaw, low sloping forehead, high cheekbones, flattened or upturned nose, handle-shaped ears, hawk-like nose or fleshy lips, hard, shifty eyes, scanty beard or baldness, insensitivity to pain, and long arms relative to the lower limbs. So that's pretty interesting. And then I found an atlas to one of his books called The Criminal Man. And basically, an atlas is just like a picture book to read alongside the actual book. And it has all the illustrations in it of like different criminals. And I just thought I'd slowly scroll through this so you guys could see some of the criminals that he has drawn in his book here. They're pretty funny. Let's see if we can make this bigger. Yeah, there we go. Some of them are so funny. Look at this guy in the top right. Those ones are harder to see. What? Anyways, pretty funny. So yeah. Now I want to quickly go back to Lavater and something he says on, I think it's page 51. And this will sort of transition us onto our next section, talking about physiognomy in like the 21st century. So I think it's 51, yeah, page 51. He says here, I have an additional motive to be brief, which is that most of these difficulties are included in the indescribable minuteness of innumerable traits of character, or the impossibility of seizing, expressing, and analyzing certain sensations and observations. Okay, but I want to draw your attention to this. Most of these difficulties are included in the indescribable minuteness of innumerable traits of character. So, if I'm reading that correctly, what he's saying that like so many of the different physiognomical traits in a person's face that separates them from another person are not like obvious things like a protruding jaw or a receding chin, right? Or like the way your forehead slopes. It's like really like non-obvious things that are difficult to detect. And so in some ways it's difficult for a human, unless they're very observant, to characterize or perform well in physiognomy. But do you know what can pick up on small things in the face? Is computers. And that sort of brings us to physiognomy in the modern day, and the ability of cameras and neural networks to pick up on these traits of innumerable or indescribable minuteness, as Lavater says. So I'm just going to switch the screen over to my other... Oh, nope, that's wrong. There we go. This one here. So, I just want to go over a bunch of studies that I pulled up, basically showing that physiognomy is not completely bogus. Okay? So, in this study, they are studying facial metrics and how it predicts aggressive behavior. So, one thing to know before I read you the summary finding here is that the width to height ratio of the head, so they're calling it like facial width to height ratio, is something that emerges in males because of testosterone exposure during puberty, right? So if you look at a woman's face, generally speaking, it's much more slim, whereas a man has like a wide jaw, right? And so in these studies that they did on male hockey players, they found that individual differences in the facial width to height ratio were positively correlated with aggressive behavior as measured by number of penalty minutes per game. So basically, if you have a wider width to height ratio in your head, you get more penalty minutes, because the underlying reason being you have more testosterone, and testosterone makes you aggressive, right? So there you go. Here's a direct example of somebody's facial or exterior trait predicting behavior, or an internal trait, right? Here we have another one. The data reveal that people who were thought to look dishonest were more likely to volunteer to participate in research that was described as requiring deception on their part than were individuals who were perceived to look honest. So basically, people that look dishonest might actually be dishonest, and people who look honest might actually be more honest, right? Surprise, surprise. Here's another one. This one's crazy. In conclusion, we have shown that people can judge intelligence from facial appearance, and that when they do so, it is apparently by using the valid cue of attractiveness. So yeah, you can look at somebody and tell if they're smart, because more attractive people tend to be smarter, which is bonkers. And of course there's variation, right? One thing I will mention here in regards to, like, especially with the computers picking up on facial cues and like predicting internal traits, is that we should expect, hopefully, if you believe in free will, that computers will never achieve 100% classification rate. They'll never be able to perfectly characterize your character, or else free will doesn't exist, right? They might get very close. They might get like 90-something%, but they'll never reach 100, because if it reaches 100%, that basically like disproves free will, right? At least on a fine-grained level, right? If you make it very coarse, if it's only like two output categories, like conservative or liberal or something, maybe it might get 100% in regards to that. But for like very for predicting somebody's exact character, we would expect never for a computer to get 100% totally. Some more findings that are interesting are this one's cool too, because it kind of goes back to the idea of Lombroso and predicting criminals based on their facial appearance. This paper says that all four classifiers perform consistently well and produce evidence for the validity of automated face-induced inference on criminality, despite the historical controversy. So basically, this paper was able to predict whether or not you are a criminal or have criminal record based on your face. This one's crazy too. Facial recognition technology can expose political orientation from naturalistic face images. And so chance, obviously 50%, you just guess. Human accuracy is 55, so humans, I guess, can sort of guess based on their face whether or not you're conservative or a liberal. 100-item personality questionnaire is only 66%. You would expect it to be higher, but it's not. And then they took images off Facebook and dating websites, and it was able to predict with 69% accuracy whether or not you're a conservative or liberal. So that's crazy. This one is also crazy. Deep neural networks are more accurate than humans at detecting sexual orientation from facial images. So basically, the reason I pulled up these studies is just to show that like the computer has kind of revived this idea of physiognomy and kind of has proven the haters wrong, I guess. Yeah, so a couple last things here. I wanted to, the Wikipedia article on physiognomy, at the very bottom, it talks about 3 different pathways by which physiognomy could be true, right? So the first way is that facial appearance might shape psychological traits, right? This is sort of the opposite of what physiognomy would expect, right? Physiognomy kind of says that, you know, the mind shapes the face, but this sort of says it might be opposite, right? So perhaps there's like a self-fulfilling prophecy effect where people that are perceived as having a particular attribute are treated accordingly. They internalize that, and then over time they may engage in behaviors consistent with others' perceptions, right? So the example they give is that people with larger jaws are perceived as more socially dominant, and thus over time they may actually become more socially dominant. The second way that physiognomy might be true is that latent factors may influence both the face and the mind in the same direction, right? So like socioeconomic status, if you're rich, maybe being rich makes you more confident and then also changes your face to match. That could be perhaps so latent factors is the second method. And the third pathway by which physiognomy might be true is the way that physiognomy actually claims, is that the mind influences the face. And we tend to think of our faces as kind of fixed, but they might actually be shaped by factors like hormones or diet, and of course diet influences hormones, right? Physical health, like exercise, things like that. So let's see if they give an example. Yeah, conservatives tend to be more self-disciplined and are thus healthier, consume less tobacco and alcohol, and have a better diet, altering their facial fat distribution and skin health, right? Although physiognomy kind of postulates a deeper connection, right? Not just like fat distribution, but like bone structure as well. So that's perhaps possible as well. So to close, I want to say that the New York Times has labeled physiognomy as pseudoscience. But we just saw that through all these studies that it might actually not be. And I want you to ask yourself, take a look one more time at this picture of Mr. Burns. Would you trust him with your kids? Probably not. So maybe there is something to this physiognomy thing. Maybe it's not as pseudoscientific as some people might claim. So yeah, that's all. Thanks for holding in there. It's a long one, but I hope you learned something, and see you in the next one.